Captured by a human, she thought he would make her suffer. Velthira's heart raced as the stars outside the small window of the human vessel blurred past. She had spent her life studying other civilizations, preparing for moments like this, and yet nothing could have prepared her for the strange mixture of fear and curiosity that consumed her now. She had always believed humans were chaotic, cruel, and unpredictable. Her people's records told of humans' capacity for destruction and their relentless curiosity that often led to pain for those they encountered. She had thought herself ready, but the reality was far different. When she first regained consciousness, the soft hum of the ship's engines was the first thing she noticed. It was not the low growl of weaponized engines or the clanging echo of a prison cell she expected, but a smooth, almost calming sound. Her senses were sharp, and she could detect the faint scent of metal and a hint of something she could not identify. It was neither threatening nor particularly welcoming, and yet it unsettled her. The human who had captured her was not what she expected either. Ilia's ward was tall, with broad shoulders and steady eyes that did not flinch at her stare. He did not raise his voice. He did not make sudden movements. He simply observed her from across the room as if he were waiting for something, though she could not tell what. Every instinct in her body screamed that she should be afraid, but there was no immediate threat. This indecision, this lack of obvious cruelty, was almost worse than the pain she had anticipated. She tried to move to get her bearings, but realized her limbs felt heavy. Not with chains, but with a strange, human method of control she had never encountered, restriction without force. Her movements were limited by the layout of the room and a few carefully placed objects, not by confinement. Ilia spoke then, his voice calm and measured without the sharp edge she had been expecting. "Velthira," he said, "you are aboard my vessel. You are not in danger, but I cannot allow you to leave until we reach the next port. I will explain everything you need to know if you are willing to listen." She stiffened at the use of her full name. Names in her culture were powerful things, often used to establish dominance. The fact that he spoke it without malice, without mockery, unsettled her further. She was trained to expect threats, deception, and intimidation, yet here was a human offering honesty. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice tight. Ilias stepped closer, but not too close. He maintained a careful distance, respecting her space. "I do not want to hurt you," he said plainly. "I want to understand why you are here. I want to make sure you travel safely until we reach a place where your return is possible." Velthira's eyes narrowed. Understanding, safety, these were not words she associated with humans. Humans were supposed to enjoy seeing others suffer, or at least gain something from it. She tried to analyze him, to look for the hidden threat, but found nothing. Every time she thought she had spotted a flicker of malice, it turned out to be just curiosity or perhaps patience, something her people rarely displayed in moments of capture. Days passed, though she did not know how many. Time on the ship had a rhythm of its own, marked by the hum of the engines, the brief flicker of stars outside, and the quiet routines of the human crew. She observed Ilias closely, expecting him to slip, to reveal some cruel habit, some hidden desire to make her suffer. But he did not. He maintained the same calm demeanor, offering food when she accepted, water when she asked, explanations when she questioned. It was disorienting. Her mind raced with questions. Why would a human act this way? What could he gain from her safety? Her species had no word for the kind of restraint he demonstrated. She had been trained to assume that mercy was weakness, and that weakness must be exploited. Yet every moment spent observing him made her question that assumption. Perhaps she had been wrong about humans. Perhaps their strength did not come from the ability to inflict pain, but from the ability to choose not to. She tried to communicate, to test him. "If I tried to escape," she said one day, "what would happen?" Ilias smiled faintly, as if he had anticipated the question. "You would not be able to. The ship is secure, and I would guide you back safely. But I trust you will not attempt to escape because you are learning just as I am. Captivity is not always about force. Sometimes it is about understanding. Sometimes it is about patience." Velthira frowned. The word patience had no real translation in her language. It was close to endurance, but different. Endurance was about surviving suffering, about resisting pain until it became intolerable. Patience, as he described it, was something else entirely. It was active, intentional, a form of power she had never considered. As the hours stretched into days, she began to notice small details. The way Ilias treated the crew, the way he communicated with others, the way he explained situations without condescension or threat. Humans were unpredictable, yes, but not in the way she expected. They did not act out of cruelty, but out of curiosity, confidence, and a strange sense of fairness. Her people had always assumed that fairness was weakness, yet here it was, and it commanded respect. She remembered the stories of her ancestors, the warnings about humans. They had told of humans who burned cities, who enslaved entire species, who delighted in torment. And yet here was a human who had captured her, and the only thing he had done was ensure her safety, her comfort, and her understanding. She felt a strange conflict rising within her, the fear ingrained in her from childhood and a new, unbidden feeling, admiration perhaps, or awe. One evening she found herself speaking to him without prompting. "Why do you act this way?" she asked. He looked at her, his eyes calm but penetrating. "Because I can," he said simply. "Because I have the choice to act differently, because I believe that understanding is stronger than fear. You came here thinking humans would harm you. I am showing you that we can choose not to." Velthira studied his face, searching for the hidden meaning, the trap. She found none. It was not weakness. It was not fear. It was confidence rooted in something she could not yet name. And in that moment, she realized that the humans' power was not in their ability to dominate, but in their ability to exercise restraint, to act with intention, to create choice where others expected only compulsion. Sleep came reluctantly that night, her mind restless with thoughts she had never considered. Humans were different, yes, but not in the way her people believed. They were not chaotic or cruel. They were deliberate, resilient, and patient in ways that were foreign to her culture. And for the first time, she wondered if her people had misunderstood the galaxy itself. The days continued, and with each passing hour, Velthira's fear began to shift. It did not vanish entirely, for caution was ingrained in her species, but it transformed into something more complex. It became curiosity. It became a desire to understand this human, to learn how a being so different could possess such a quiet strength. She found herself listening to his explanations, asking questions, and observing the patterns of human behavior with the same intensity she had once reserved for battle strategies and diplomatic tactics. Elias, in turn, did not rush her. He allowed her to explore the ship under supervision, to learn about the human systems, to ask questions freely. He did not hide information. He did not manipulate her emotions. He simply acted as he believed any intelligent being should, with honesty, respect, and patience. Each gesture, each word, chipped away at the walls Velthira had built around her mind. By the end of what she calculated to be the 5th day, she was no longer certain of anything. Humans were not the monsters her people had warned her about. And yet they were dangerous in a way she had not anticipated. Not because they could hurt, but because they could change minds, challenge assumptions, and teach lessons without raising a hand. That realization was more unsettling than any threat she had imagined. And so Velthira sat by the window, watching the stars drift past, her thoughts tangled with fear, curiosity, and a growing, reluctant respect. She did not yet understand the human fully. She did not yet trust completely. But she knew one thing. Whatever she had expected from captivity, it was nothing like this. And perhaps in time, that difference would prove to be the most powerful lesson of all. Velthira's days aboard the human vessel had settled into a rhythm, though she would not have called it comfort. She was learning, observing, and thinking constantly. The strange mixture of curiosity and caution had become her companion, shadowing her even in her moments of rest. Each interaction with Elias Ward left her both unsettled and fascinated. He did not act like any being she had ever encountered. There was no dominance in his gaze, no impatience in his movements. He treated her with a calm attention that felt almost revolutionary to her. Today, she was allowed to move freely in a part of the vessel she had not seen before. It was a room filled with screens, panels, and strange lights. The human called it the control room. Her first instinct was to touch nothing, to step lightly, to make no sudden move that might provoke some hidden punishment. But Elias' voice stopped her before she could retreat. "You are safe here," he said. "Everything is explained, nothing is hidden." She studied him carefully. Every time she tried to read his intentions, she found them empty of trickery. Even now, she felt a strange trust forming, though she resisted it. Trust was dangerous. Trust could be exploited, yet something about his calm demeanor made her doubt her instincts. "I do not understand why you treat me this way," she admitted, her voice quiet but firm. Why you do not take advantage of my fear? Elias smiled faintly, as if expecting the question. Because I can choose not to, he said. Humans are not defined by the cruelty we might use, but by the decisions we make in moments like this. You expected suffering. I am giving you choice. Velthira frowned. Choice was not a concept her people valued. To her, power came from control, from forcing outcomes. The human concept of restraint was almost foreign. She studied him closely, trying to see the flaw, the hidden truth. There had to be one. Nothing in her training suggested a being could act with such freedom of intention. Yet here he was. Days turned into weeks, or so it seemed. The vessel moved from one region of space to another, and Velthira watched everything with keen interest. She observed the human systems, their routines, and the way Elias interacted with his crew. There was respect but not weakness, guidance but not command in the harsh sense she had expected. It was a strange balance she could not yet name. One day she ventured into the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly in every direction, and for the first time since her capture, she allowed herself to breathe deeply. The human's presence was calm nearby, silent but reassuring. She thought about the reports her species would write, captured by humans, studied and restrained. They would assume she had suffered, that fear had ruled her days, but she had not suffered, not physically, not mentally. She had been challenged, yes, challenged to think, to reconsider, to understand, but she had not been broken. Elias joined her, looking out at the same view. Do you see? He asked. The universe is vast. There is more here than fear, more than power. There are choices, and how you make them defines you. Velthira considered his words carefully. She had always believed that survival depended on strength, cunning, and the ability to exploit fear. Yet every day on this vessel contradicted that belief. Survival, she was beginning to realize, was not always about force. Sometimes it was about understanding, patience, and restraint. I was told humans were cruel, she said after a pause, that they enjoyed suffering, that they were dangerous. They can be, he admitted. But cruelty is a choice, danger is a choice. I have chosen otherwise, that is the difference. Her mind spun with the implications. If humans were not inherently cruel, then the legends of her people were incomplete, perhaps even wrong. She had underestimated them. Not once, but many times. And if she had underestimated them, how many others had? How many battles had been fought under false assumptions? How many alliances had been broken because one side feared the other unnecessarily? She turned her gaze back to the stars. And if someone else came aboard, she asked, someone less restrained? Elias' face remained calm. Then you would see a different kind of danger, but that danger would be no greater than the choices you make when faced with it. Every species has the capacity for both harm and mercy. It is the choices that define the outcome. Velthira felt a shiver of realization. Humans were dangerous not because they sought to destroy, but because they could act with restraint, confidence, and wisdom. They did not need to dominate to be powerful. They did not need to inflict pain to teach lessons. The very act of choosing not to harm could be more formidable than any weapon her people possessed. Her observations turned more analytical. She began to study Elias' actions in detail. How he spoke to crew members, how he maintained order without fear, how he explained the ship's systems with patience and clarity. She realized that his behavior was consistent, deliberate, and methodical. There was a strategy, yes, but it was one built on understanding, not coercion. One afternoon, while exploring the vessel's library, she found a human book. She did not know the language fully, but the pictures and diagrams conveyed stories of human history. Disasters overcome, mistakes acknowledged, resilience demonstrated. Humans were not invincible, nor were they cruel by default. They survived by learning, adapting, and supporting each other in ways Velthira had never imagined. Elias found her there, flipping through pages with careful curiosity. He did not scold her, nor did he demand explanations. He simply watched, allowing her to explore freely. Knowledge is freedom, he said gently. Understanding others is power. Velthira's thoughts returned to her own species. They often relied on fear and reputation to maintain control. Strength was measured by dominance, not understanding. She realized now that her people's approach was limited. Humans, in contrast, measured power differently. It was not about what they could take, but what they could give. Days passed with lessons disguised as ordinary routines. Elias would explain the ship systems, teach her to navigate charts, and share stories of human history. Velthira listened intently, absorbing every detail, questioning every assumption. She found herself learning more about the galaxy and herself than she ever had on her homeworld. One evening, the vessel passed through a field of luminous gas clouds. The stars shimmered through the clouds, creating an ethereal landscape that seemed almost alive. Velthira stood at the observation deck, mesmerized. Elias joined her silently, and for a moment neither spoke. The vastness of space, the hum of the engines, and the shared silence created a strange intimacy she had never experienced before. "Do you trust me?" he asked quietly. The question startled her. Trust was not something she gave lightly. She had been trained to question motives, to anticipate betrayal, yet she found herself answering truthfully. I am learning to," she admitted. "That is enough," he said, his voice calm. "Trust is not a demand, it is a choice, and choice is always powerful." Velthira thought about his words long after he left the observation deck. Choice, power, understanding. These were concepts she had overlooked, underestimated, or misunderstood. Humans had shown her that power was not only in what you could take, but in what you chose to give, in the restraint you exercised, and in the patience you maintained. She realized that her capture had not been what she had feared. She had expected pain, manipulation, or humiliation. Instead, she had been given an experience that challenged her mind and spirit. She had been captured not by force, but by intellect, patience, and moral strength. The vessel moved steadily toward its destination, and Velthira found herself anticipating the arrival with a mix of excitement and apprehension. She wondered what her people would think if they knew the truth, that humans were not monsters, but beings capable of remarkable restraint and understanding. She wondered if her species could ever learn to measure strength in the same way. As the days passed, her fear continued to shift into something more nuanced. She was cautious, yes, but she was also curious, thoughtful, and reflective. Elias had not only captured her body, but also her attention, her mind, and in a sense, her perspective. She was beginning to see the galaxy differently, to understand that fear and caution were not the only ways to navigate it. Understanding, patience, and choice were equally powerful. And so Velthira sat by the window each evening, watching the stars, reflecting on what she had learned, and preparing herself for the challenges yet to come. She did not yet fully trust humanity, nor did she fully understand them. But she knew one thing with certainty. The humans' true power lay not in their capacity to harm, but in their ability to choose restraint, understanding, and compassion. And that was a lesson she would never forget. Velthira had begun to notice patterns in the humans, behavior that she had not fully understood before. Their routines, their small gestures, and even their silences seemed deliberate, almost purposeful in a way that contrasted sharply with her people's more rigid methods. She found herself observing them with a mixture of fascination and unease. Elias, in particular, had become a constant source of contemplation. She could no longer predict his actions, not because they were chaotic, but because they were guided by a principle she did not yet fully grasp: balance. The human's calmness had a strange effect on her. In moments when her mind swirled with worry about her species, reaction to her capture, about how she would explain her time on this vessel, she found that just being near him eased the tension slightly. It was not trust, not fully, but a tentative acknowledgement that perhaps humans were more than the violent legends suggested. And this acknowledgement unsettled her more than fear ever had. One morning, she was allowed to enter the ship's training room. It was a wide, open space filled with tools for exercise and skill development. Velthira moved cautiously at first, her senses alert for any hidden danger. But as she looked around, she realized that there was none. Elias followed her, observing quietly, occasionally offering guidance. "You should stretch first," he said. His voice was calm, patient. "We do not rush and we do not force." She raised an eyebrow. "Stretch, why would I need that?" He smiled faintly. "Because the body, like the mind, responds better when prepared. Strength is not only in action, but also in readiness." Velthira tried to mimic his movements, slowly bending, reaching, and twisting in ways that were unfamiliar to her species. She felt her muscles awaken, not from strain, but from careful, deliberate movement. Elias guided her gently, correcting posture, explaining the purpose behind each motion. She realized that humans trained differently, not just for survival, but for understanding their own limits and potential. As the days passed, she began to notice another pattern, the way humans learned from mistakes. Every error, every small misstep was treated not as failure, but as opportunity. She had never encountered a species so willing to reflect, to adjust, and to grow without fear of punishment. Her own people often punished errors harshly, believing that fear bred precision. But humans seemed to believe that learning bred strength. One afternoon, as she struggled with a particularly difficult exercise, Elias approached her quietly. "You are impatient with yourself," he observed. "I am not used to this," she admitted. "We do not take time to adjust." "Mistakes are costly." "They are costly, yes," he said, "but learning from them is invaluable. Humans survive not because we avoid mistakes, but because we use them." Velthira considered his words carefully. There was wisdom in them, a perspective that challenged everything she had believed about survival, about intelligence, and about strength. She felt a flicker of admiration, though she tried to mask it. Admiration, after all, was dangerous. It could cloud judgment. Yet she could not deny it. In the evenings, she continued her observations from the ship's observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly, reminding her of the vastness of the galaxy and the insignificance of her previous fears. She began to see patterns in the cosmos, in the way planets moved, and in the way light traveled across distances. Her mind, trained for analysis and strategy, found a strange peace in these patterns, as if the universe itself was teaching her patience. Elias joined her one evening carrying 2 small cups filled with a warm liquid she did not recognize. He handed one to her without comment, waiting patiently as she examined it. "What is this?" she asked. "Tea," he said. "It is calming, it helps focus the mind." Velthira hesitated, then took a cautious sip. The taste was unusual, but not unpleasant. She found that the warmth spread through her chest, settling nerves she had not realized were tense. Elias leaned against the railing beside her, not touching, not intruding, just present. "You are thinking a lot," he said softly. She nodded. "I am trying to understand. My people have always warned me about humans. I expected cruelty. I expected fear. I did not expect this." He nodded as if acknowledging her struggle. "It is often easier to fear than to understand, but understanding is more powerful than fear." Velthira turned her gaze back to the stars. She realized he was right. Her fear had been rooted in stories and assumptions, in what she had been taught to expect. But now, faced with reality, she was beginning to see that strength was not measured by how much harm one could inflict, but by how much one could endure without yielding to base instincts. The ship continued its journey, moving through sectors of space that Velthira had only studied from afar. She marveled at the complexity of the human vessel, the precision of its systems, and the harmony of its crew. Every day brought new lessons, small victories, and moments of reflection. She realized that her captivity was not confinement, but education. She was learning not only about humans, but about herself, her species, and the nature of choice. One day, Elias invited her to the ship's bridge. The view was breathtaking. A nebula stretched across the horizon, its colors shifting in patterns that seemed almost alive. Velthira stood in awe, forgetting for a moment the reasons for her capture, the warnings of her people, and the assumptions she had carried for so long. "This is beautiful," she said quietly. "It is," Elias agreed, "and it is a reminder that the galaxy is vast. There is more to see than fear, more to experience than control." She turned to him, searching his face for hidden meanings, but found none. There was only honesty, patience, and a quiet strength that radiated from him. For the first time, Velthira felt that the humans' true power lay not in their weapons, their technology, or their capacity for destruction, but in their ability to navigate complexity with integrity and patience. Days became weeks, and Velthira began to test her own limits. She explored sections of the ship that had previously been off-limits, learned to operate small systems under guidance, and practiced exercises that strengthened both mind and body. Every new task challenged her, but each challenge also revealed her own potential. She realized that humans did not measure strength in the same way her people did. They measured it in growth, adaptability, and understanding. One evening, as she returned to her quarters, she found a small note left for her. It was written in human script, simple and direct. "You are learning quickly. Keep observing. Every choice you make matters." She held the note in her hands, feeling a strange mixture of pride and curiosity. She had never received guidance in this way before. Her people taught through fear, through demonstration of consequences, through pressure. Humans taught through encouragement, through patience, and through the expectation of reflection. The difference was profound. Velthira realized that the lessons she was learning would stay with her long after her release. She would remember the patience of humans, their willingness to teach rather than punish, and their ability to exercise restraint when they could have chosen otherwise. She understood for the first time that captivity did not always mean suffering. It could mean growth, reflection, and understanding. She thought of her own species and the rigidity that often governed their decisions. How different would they be if they adopted even a fraction of what she had learned from humans? Could fear be replaced by patience? Could control be replaced by guidance? The questions spun endlessly in her mind, each one more challenging than the last. Velthira knew that the time aboard the vessel would end. She did not yet know when, but the thought did not frighten her as it once would have. Instead, it filled her with anticipation. She was leaving with knowledge, with understanding, and with a new perspective on strength, choice, and the human way of life. As the ship moved through another sector of space, the stars stretching endlessly, Velthira felt a strange peace settle over her. She was no longer merely a captive. She was a student, an observer, and in a way a participant in something larger than herself. Elia's quiet strength, the patience of the crew, and the vastness of space had taught her more than any mission, any battle, or any diplomatic encounter ever could. And for the first time, she allowed herself to wonder, not with fear, but with curiosity, what other lessons awaited her in the galaxy. Velthira had grown accustomed to the rhythm of life aboard the human vessel, yet she sensed that the journey was nearing a turning point. Each day had been a lesson in observation, patience, and understanding, and with every interaction, she felt her preconceived notions about humans shifting in subtle but profound ways. What had begun as fear was now tempered with curiosity and even a hint of admiration. Yet she also knew that this delicate equilibrium could be tested. One morning, Elias approached her with a gentle but purposeful expression. "Velthira," he said, "we are approaching a region where the path will require careful navigation. I will need your assistance." Her eyes widened. Assistance? She had never expected to be asked to contribute in a meaningful way. Captivity in her experience had always meant restriction, observation, and control. Humans, however, seemed to operate differently. They offered participation and guidance even to those they had captured. I am not trained for your systems," she admitted cautiously. "I do not know if I can help." "You can," Elias said confidently. "You have been observing closely. You understand more than you realize. All I ask is that you follow instructions and apply what you have learned." Velthira hesitated, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing against her chest. To fail could be catastrophic, or at least that was the instinct ingrained in her by years of disciplined training. But the human's calm demeanor did not falter. He was patient, trusting her to rise to the occasion. That trust was foreign, yet strangely compelling. She moved to the control panel beside him, her claws tracing the smooth surface with tentative precision. Elias guided her, explaining each system step by step. She noticed small patterns, subtle redundancies, and the elegance of human design. The vessel was built not only for efficiency, but for clarity, with each control serving a purpose and every procedure designed to minimize confusion. Her people could have learned much from this approach, she thought. As they navigated through the region, Velthira found herself relying on instincts she had long suppressed. She had been trained to calculate probabilities, anticipate hazards, and predict behaviors. Now, combined with Elias' guidance and the systems she was learning to operate, she realized she could contribute in ways she had never imagined. Her pulse quickened, not with fear, but with a new form of engagement. Hours passed in tense concentration. The stars shifted outside the vessel, distant suns casting long streaks of light across the hull. Velthira worked alongside Elias, each movement deliberate, each calculation precise. She could feel the hum of the engines beneath her, the subtle vibration of the ship, and the quiet confidence of the human beside her. Every decision mattered, and yet there was no panic, no rush. This was a new kind of challenge, one that tested her mind, her focus, and her willingness to trust another being completely. At one point, an unexpected gravitational fluctuation threatened to push the ship off course. Velthira's heart jumped, her instincts screaming for immediate correction. She froze for a moment, but Elias' voice cut through the tension, calm and steady. Observe first, he said. Then act. Reacting without understanding will not help. She exhaled slowly and examined the data, tracing the patterns carefully. Then, with measured precision, she adjusted the controls, correcting the trajectory. The ship stabilized, and a sense of accomplishment washed over her. Elias smiled, nodding in acknowledgement. Very good, he said. You learned quickly, you applied your observations. That is how humans solve challenges, through understanding, not panic. Velthira felt a surge of pride mingled with surprise. She had never been praised in such a way. Her species measured success by survival or by dominance, rarely by skillful execution. Yet here, she had been recognized for her intelligence and composure. She realized that humans had a strength that her people did not fully comprehend, a power rooted in clarity, patience, and collaboration. Later, she retreated to the observation deck, letting the adrenaline fade as she gazed at the vast expanse of space. The nebulae and distant stars seemed almost alive, each twinkling point a reminder of the infinite possibilities that lay before her. She thought about her species, their rigid methods, and the lessons she had learned from humans. She wondered if her people could ever adopt even a fraction of the patience and understanding she had witnessed. Her thoughts were interrupted by Elias, who joined her silently. He handed her a small device, one she had never seen before. "This is a scanner," he explained. "It helps identify environmental variables ahead. I want you to try it." Velthira examined it cautiously, feeling the weight of responsibility once again. Elias' patience was unwavering, and she realized that he expected her to succeed not out of fear of failure, but out of belief in her ability. She activated the device, following the instructions carefully. The scanner hummed softly, relaying data she analyzed with her trained mind. She identified patterns, anomalies, and potential risks. Elias observed quietly, offering guidance only when necessary. After several attempts, she succeeded in completing the scan accurately. Elias clapped his hands softly, a small gesture that made her feel both validation and surprise. "Excellent," he said. "You are learning faster than most would under similar circumstances." Velthira felt a thrill she had never known. Her captivity had transformed into an experience that challenged her intellect, honed her skills, and expanded her understanding of the universe. She realized that humans did not rely solely on fear to teach lessons or enforce obedience. They relied on trust, guidance, and the opportunity to grow. That night, as she lay in her quarters, Velthira reflected on the events of the day. Her mind was alive with possibilities. She considered the lessons she had learned, the strategies she had applied, and the confidence she had gained. The experience had transformed her perception of humanity, and perhaps even her perception of herself. She understood now that strength was not only in physical power or dominance, but in patience, understanding, and the ability to act wisely in moments of challenge. The following morning, the ship passed through a dense asteroid field. Velthira's instincts screamed caution, but Elias' calm voice guided her through the process. He explained each movement, each adjustment, and each potential hazard. She applied her knowledge, predicting movements and adjusting controls with precision. Together, they navigated the field successfully, and Velthira felt a sense of accomplishment and clarity she had never experienced before. "Humans are different," she admitted during a quiet moment. "Not what I expected, not at all." Elias looked at her with gentle amusement. "Different is not always bad, sometimes it is better." Her thoughts drifted to her homeworld, to the rigid methods and assumptions of her species. She wondered how her people would react if they knew that humans did not rely on fear, that they exercised patience, and that they valued understanding over domination. Perhaps they would dismiss it as anomaly. Perhaps they would fear it. Yet she knew in her heart that the lessons she was learning were profound and transformative. As the ship approached a particularly complex region of space, Velthira faced a decision that tested everything she had learned. A minor navigational dilemma presented itself. One path promised a faster route but carried unknown variables, while the other was safer but slower. Her instincts urged caution, but Elias' earlier lessons encouraged analysis, observation, and measured choice. She studied the data carefully, weighing risks and outcomes. She remembered the lessons of patience, trust, and understanding. Finally, she made her choice, selecting the path that required careful maneuvering but promised greater insight into the region's complexities. The decision required her to trust her own judgment, to rely on her observations, and to embrace responsibility fully. The human captain observed silently, offering no guidance, no suggestions, only his calm presence. Velthira felt the weight of the moment, the tension of responsibility, and the thrill of choice. When the vessel successfully navigated the region, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Elias nodded in approval. "You made the right choice," he said simply. Velthira realized in that moment that humans were not only patient and resilient, they empowered others to rise to challenges, to make choices, and to learn from experience. Their strength was not hidden in force, but in the ability to guide, teach, and inspire growth. She understood that captivity could be a tool not for suffering, but for education, reflection, and development. The days continued with subtle lessons, each more complex than the last. Velthira's confidence grew, her understanding deepened, and her perception of humans evolved further. She no longer viewed them solely through the lens of fear and caution. She saw them as a species capable of extraordinary patience, wisdom, and moral clarity. By the time the vessel neared its next scheduled stop, Velthira felt transformed. Her fear had not vanished entirely, but it had been tempered by knowledge, understanding, and a growing respect for the humans who had captured her. She realized that her journey was not only about travel through space, but about travel through ideas, perspectives, and self-awareness. And so, as the stars stretched endlessly around the vessel, Velthira prepared for the next chapter of her journey. She had faced challenges, navigated uncertainty, and embraced responsibility in ways she had never imagined. The humans had shown her a new kind of power, one rooted in choice, patience, and understanding. She understood now that true strength was not measured by fear inflicted or obedience forced, but by the wisdom to act rightly, the patience to guide others, and the courage to make choices that mattered. And in that understanding, Velthira felt a profound shift within herself, a quiet, steady realization that her captivity had become a journey of growth, insight, and transformation, one that would shape not only her future, but the way she would see the galaxy forever.